So, welcome. What is up, everybody? Is addiction a disease? That is the question. And we're going to flip the camera here. We are going to flip the camera. You know, I like to talk a lot about quitting smoking because that is a thing that I have done. And it's not just quitting smoking, I would say. It's becoming a non-smoker. And I'm here on Big Island, Hawaii. Look at this beautiful view. And we are about to go live on Facebook as well. Here too. What is up, Facebook? So is addiction a disease? Well, there's something called the disease model of addiction. And is it a disease? Well, the disease model of addiction largely started in Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a really, really cool way. Well, Alcoholics Anonymous is, first of all, obviously it's an anonymous group. It's like a self-help group movement, and it features the 12 steps. And the 12 steps is an amazing way to deal with addiction. It's an amazing way. And I'm just wondering if we are live here because I'm not getting a notification necessarily. Oh, yep, I see me on Facebook. Good. So I can make sure I'm in the camera and everything. But the 12 steps is a way to manage the disease of addiction from the AA model. But I mean, I think the 12 steps is a wonderful way to work through addiction. And some of the other principles embedded in AA are amazing. Recognizing a higher power, for example. And yet the people who are telling you that disease is an addiction are not necessarily health care practitioners. They're not like a holistic psychologist or a holistic doctor or a naturopathic doctor. You know, from my point of view, now there's some research scientists, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. There are, excuse me as I fumble through my live here because it's my first time doing my live this way. I wanted the cameras to not have to mirror me, to be able to face me, and to do that I can't see what's on the camera. So anyhow, but now I can see it on this phone here. So I see that I'm in frame. But so there are some medical researchers who say that disease is an addiction. And there's some research that says it might not be an addiction, right? And so medical research, there's a gap oftentimes between research and the practice of, the practice of health or medicine, let's say. And so that gap is important because what the people that are telling you that a disease is an addiction are not necessarily healthcare practitioners. Okay. And as I say, some mainstream ones might be looking at that research and then saying that, but primarily the idea came before any research that backed it up. So it's kind of like when you have an emotion and then you come up with thoughts to back it up, right? And that's one way that we work, especially when we're compulsive, by the way, right? We have an emotion, which having an emotion about how something is a good step towards making it be that way. like an emotion paired with a thought. It's like a belief with a feeling. Okay. And so, and if you repeat it enough, it becomes an identity. So if you're a smoker, if that's your identity, you have to fulfill that psychologically, emotionally. And when they said the disease is an addiction in AA, they meant it on multiple levels, like a psycho-spiritual, physiological disease. And I think there are all those elements to addiction, and that there are those elements to disease. And however, the idea of a disease, the disease model in addiction specifically, says that it's permanent. And so again, if we're thinking that and feeling that, then we have no choice but to create that. And it's also an important concept for some addicts, and particularly you smokers who want to quit smoking, is that if you go back to smoking, you'll be right back in your disease, right? It's a helpful concept in a way from the disease model, because if you know, it's like you have one cigarette and then you're just back in it. You're smoking 2 packs a day. There's no gradual, like it wasn't maybe in the beginning where you gradually increased, if that ever was the case for you. And so for some people, that's definitely true. For others, it may not be true. And you know, I think in the disease model, they're speaking to the people for whom it's true and saying it as if it's true for everyone. Maybe that seems like a safe bet, or maybe that's what is believed in that, within that system. And I think that they believe that's the most helpful thing to say. But for some people, it may not be. Because when we go with a diagnosis, our mind goes to the idea that it's permanent. That's what our psychology just kind of does with that. I'm going to have some, not just plain water here, but nothing alcoholic or anything like that. Always put sea salt in my water. It helps the adrenal glands, and some other processes I do with my water. So plain water doesn't hydrate, as a side note. And it's important to me to look at things from a perspective of holistic health and harm reduction. There's other models. Many people may not realize there's other models to deal with addiction other than what they call the disease model. But by and large, the people telling you that addiction is a disease are not healthcare practitioners. Okay. And so if you go to Google search and you search, is addiction a disease? And then you put PubMed after it. Is addiction a disease? Space, new word, PubMed, PUBMED. That putting PubMed after a topic brings up peer-reviewed academic research articles about that topic. And so right there, you'll see the first article says addiction is a brain disease, right? And so that comes from certain neurobiological studies, and they're looking at certain markers that are associated with addiction and with compulsive behavior particularly. However, compulsive behavior is only one aspect of addiction. And there's a lot of assumption there. The assumption that our behavior comes from our consciousness, our behavior comes from our brain. I mean, it may be an aspect of it. In transpersonal psychology, we know that our consciousness is more than our brain. Even in holistic health, we know that our consciousness has to do with our nervous system. The state that we're in, the state our consciousness is in, has to do with our nervous system. And from certain perspectives of yoga and things like that, we can see our nervous system extending out into the energy field that moves through and surrounds our body. But that's another story. But to me, this is a holistic approach. It's important. I look at things as how healthy can I be, not what disease can I fix. And that's important to me. So different approaches fit different people at different times differently. And, sometimes it's just important to quit smoking, for example. And so whatever approach works for you to help you stop. But then you have the challenge of becoming a non-smoker. If you continue to identify as a smoker, it's painful, and this is part of what we go through when we quit, I believe. But we transform into a non-smoker, and so that it's not painful, and so that we don't relapse. It's not as painful. And so if you scroll down past those articles, and by the way, take a deep breath, exhale fully. Always a good idea. And a big part of what I do here, what we do here together. So connecting with the breath is usually something I bring up in every single video. Just start by being aware that you're breathing and exhaling fully, and go from there. So our addictions, diseases, our choices is the next article down. But the third article down for me right now, because it could change, but in any case, when you put in "is addiction a disease" PubMed, you get these NCBI and or PubMed articles. Now, the third one down, and you could just search this article if you wanted to follow along with me. Addiction as a brain disease revised. Addiction as a brain disease revised. Why it still matters. And then the need for consilience. Multidisciplinary research that integrates neuroscientific, behavioral, clinical, and sociocultural perspectives. So that's an interesting word, consilience. And so the view, they say that substance abuse, this is, by the way, an article by Mark Heilig in the Journal of Neuropsychopharmacology. So this is an academic peer-reviewed journal, and it's a free article. The view that substance abuse is a brain disease, although widely accepted in the neuroscience community, so it is accepted by neuroscientists, has become subject to criticism, stating that brain disease, now they're saying it's deterministic. This is what I'm saying. It gives you a view that you're determined to be this way, that you're going to stay this way. It fails to account for heterogeneity. So heterogeneous, that's the idea that things are different as opposed to homogeneous, the same things, right? And so a heterogeneous concept like addiction, okay, like from my view, for example, Lyme disease, even, well, I won't go there, but it's various things. It's not the same. There's no one Lyme disease. There's no one addiction. Okay, it's different for different people at different times, in different bodies, in different minds, in different life evolution, life emergences within generations. Okay, it's different for different people, different, as they say here, socio-cultural circumstances, behavioral, clinical, neuroscientific. And from my view, holistic and relating to the nervous system and related to presence and vibrations, you might say, held within the body, or lack of vibrations held within the body, density, somatically held emotions. Okay. And so fails to account for heterogeneity. It's that it's not heterogeneous, or that it is heterogeneous. It's not homogeneous. It fails to account for that. And in remission and recovery. So that's important. Like how not just as this disease is different, but how you get better, right? How you recover, how you remit. And I just lost power. We have solar, but I guess we lost our lights, but we still have our broadcasts, right? And it's back. So it's off again. And so they say that this disease model places too much emphasis on compulsive dimension. Like, as I mentioned before, I'm just going to ignore that. Well, it's too late. I didn't ignore it. We're back again with lights. So I, had reviewed this article before. So these are some of the things I was summarizing before the article. And it says a specific neural signature of addiction has not been identified. So now that's interesting to me. I'm not a neuroscientist, but it's interesting to me as like a metaphor. That we all have a unique signature. And as I mentioned before, how in my view, our neurology relates to our physiology and our biology and our nervous system in a way that relates to the energy flow throughout our body, as mapped, for example, by yoga and Chinese medicine, your meridians, your chakras. And that's what I believe. If that's not your thing, that's cool. That's what I believe. And as the lights go out again, I'll continue. But the nervous system relates to the energy that flows throughout our body. And then to me, that connects with our spirituality, our sense of love, our sense of courage, our sense of the state that we're in, and our sense of our source of inspiration that's non-physical, that's beyond the brain. And as I mentioned, the disease model originally said that it was all those kind of things, and you can't, we can't measure that. The spiritual aspect, we don't measure that with our scientific method, right? And so, in a holistic sense, maybe we could call it a disease of meaning, or a disease is a sign of health. It's a sign that you're trying to adapt, and you pick maybe some strategies that don't work. Right? I can quit smoking, but if I want to chew Nicorette, if that's an okay strategy for me, if I'm not about to die of a heart attack or something, and I want to chew Nicorette for a while to quit smoking, that's okay. If I want to burn incense, I mean, it's still maybe it's inhaling smoke, but it's not smoking. If I want to do my morning prayers with some sage and have that smoke, if I want to sit by a campfire, because I know that smokers like smoke, and I know that there's a part of me that still identifies as a smoker, even though I'm changing that identity. See, when I find that part of myself that still identifies as a smoker, I don't beat myself up. Or if I start doing that, I stop myself, and I don't beat myself up for beating myself up. Do you see? When you become aware of your psychology, there are a lot of different layers in there. And in some ways, maybe it's more simplistic to just say I have a disease. And in some ways, that's maybe a good metaphor, as I mentioned before, for the fact that maybe what you have is permanent. when I think about smoking, I tell myself that I'm a non-smoker. I tell myself I won't inhale smoke again. So, with intention, I burn this. And I ask for help from the spirits of the four directions of the earth, the circle and the cross. I ask Jesus to lead, guide, and direct me. I ask my source of spiritual inspiration to support me. And I ask the Mother Earth to ground me. I do that so that I don't go back to it. And knowing that there's something that's greater than ourselves, that's also a part of the 12 steps, a higher power. I think there's a smoker that's out in the yard behind me, or an ex-smoker. Or maybe someone who just has long-term COVID, which is another reason to quit smoking. With the COVID going around, and even with people, well, I won't get into that. I don't know. I don't want to get edited. I think there's also an epidemic of censorship around it, unfortunately. As much as I disagree with a lot of things being disseminated as if they were fact, the censorship only fuels it, in my view. And it's similar, I think, in AA, in the sense that, like, if you don't believe what they believe, you're out. You're in a sense not that you're out, but I've known people who have gone through AA. This is the truth. Some people may be scared to tell you this. I'm sure that they must know, unless they're just keeping themselves in a bubble. But I've known people who have gone through the 12 steps, okay, specifically with alcohol. And they, maybe 20, 30 years later, these are like elders that I know, they're still alive. Then they say, hey, fuck it, I can have a beer. And they have one, and that's it. And their whole disease doesn't come back. Their addiction doesn't come back. There are people, it's the opposite. They have a beer, and it's like they never stopped, and they're doing all the habits that they would do when they would drink, all the things that would get them in trouble when they would drink. And that's the ism. Those are like the symptomatic criteria for that, that alcoholism idea. And yet, from a transpersonal humanistic perspective, when we label it with that diagnosis, we give the idea that it's permanent. And the truth is that there are ways to transform. There are experiential therapies. There's ways, just like I say, that you can transform into a non-smoker. Okay? You can transform your mind, your body, and your nervous system. And it tends to snap back. So I see why it's so important for certain people. Sometimes the most important thing is to not go back to the substance that you were addicted to. You've got to stop doing that. But it's not we have multiple lifetimes in this life. And some of us do and some of us don't. And some of us have used up all the drug use or drinking that we have for this life. We've done our share. Everybody gets their share, and we've done ours. And that's it. And that's how I am with smoking. I've done my smoking, and I'm just done. I'm done smoking for this lifetime. And you see how firm that is. And so through these various processes of transformation, these experiential therapies, I've integrated that. So remember that you're breathing. And remember that you can do this. You can stop smoking. You can stop smoking right now. You stop smoking after every cigarette, right? Or after every joint. But you extend that. Really extend that. Think about how many times a day you inhale smoke from a cigarette. or a joint, how many times a day you inhale smoke. And then say, like, if you've tried to quit and failed, that day you didn't make it. I mean, that happened to me many times before I successfully quit smoking. Many times. And I've quit smoking cigarettes and cannabis. I don't smoke them, and I don't have nicotine in my system. And that's a personal choice, though, too. To me, the important thing is to quit smoking, right? Because that, for me, felt like the addiction. And what happens when you stop an addiction? You find out what's behind it. The things that were stopping you come up. Things that were stopping you from quitting come up, and you've started. If you've quit and you're aware that the things that were stopping you are up in your consciousness, then you've become self-aware. You've reached a level of self-awareness. But then there's the processing to do of those things. Those are the addictions, the underlying psycho-spiritual, psychophysiological addictions. Big stuff, man. Big stuff. And so then that's where our work is. Breathing in with awareness, exhaling fully, noticing the pause, noticing the urge to inhale. Inhaling through the nose. I just took an inhale through my mouth. You can do that too. It's because I'm talking though. And so people tend to inhale through the mouth when they talk. I think sometimes they think I'm weird because I do this nose, inhale through the nose. It takes me a moment to respond when I do that. So notice any pause at the top. Notice the desire to exhale. Exhale fully. When you exhale fully, you're going to get so much more out of your inhalation. You're going to get literally more oxygen because you've exhaled fully. And then be aware of what comes up for you in your consciousness as you do this practice of coming back to being aware of your breathing. And as you cultivate this awareness of your breathing, let's say in a 15-minute seated meditation at a certain time each day, as you cultivate that, then what may happen is that you'll start to see this awareness of your breathing emerge within aspects of your day-to-day life. And that when something comes up for you, something kind of triggers you, then you remember, oh, return to breathing. And we're always breathing, so it's just a shift in awareness, right? And it's nothing too crazy. You don't have to do like transformative breath work, in any kind of intensive way that you would do in a retreat. You're just breathing. You're just exhaling fully in the moment. Inhaling through the nose, out through the mouth. Noticing the pauses between your inhalations and exhalations. And noticing what comes up in your awareness and your sensations bodily, and what you're looking at and what you're listening to. Yeah, just breathing. And it's transforming you slowly. It's transforming you. And when you do the more deep experiential work with me, then that catalyzes and integrates the transformation. And so I hope that's helpful. Throw me a comment if you have questions, or if it was helpful. Hit me up in Messenger, hit me up privately, contact me through my website if you have things that are private that you'd like to discuss, or that you just don't want to put in public comments. And I'll see you on the next video. My alarm is going off here. Thank you so much.